And we're back with writer-director Emma Seligman. Why don't we start with the beginning? This film, first you made a short called Shiva Baby. Can you talk a little bit about the short and how it grew into this feature?
Yeah, sure. So I made this short film as my thesis project in film school, and I wanted to make something for like my school project that was in a world that I understood and that felt like manageable and contained and doable and realistic. And that sort of allowed me to do something about my community that I grew up in, which is like a very reform Jewish community in Toronto. I mean, it ended up kind of taking place in sort of like New York area, generally sort of questionable. But I just wanted to make something about sort of the insecurities and anxieties that I was feeling internally, and then also like the pressures that I felt like were coming from my family and my community, and also just like the world and post grad anxieties and all that stuff. So I made the short, and I was very lucky that that short film got into South by Southwest in 2018. And me and my friends who I went to school with, Katie Schiller and Kieran Altman, put our heads together to try and go ahead and make it a feature. At that point, I'd written a few drafts of it, but it was the success of the short at South by and then at a few other really wonderful festivals that gave us the momentum to try to actually get it made. And then we brought on our third producer, Lizzie Shapiro, who was a few years ahead of us at NYU, and she had just made Mickey and the Bear. And she had that experience under her belt, but she was still kind of our age and within reach. So
Right.
she really helped us, transition into like big world, like adult kind of filmmaking and not just like guerrilla style, like getting our friends together. So we were able with her and her expertise to bring on a wonderful casting director
Mm-hmm.
and really figure out how to properly approach financiers and get the movie made. So it took many drafts to figure out the right tone to keep everything in this contained space. But we had a wonderful process, and we had an incredible cinematographer and our producers and everyone just sort of gave me and the project a lot of time and love. So it could happen. So yeah.
Totally. Well, that sounds awesome. And the main character, Danielle, played by Rachel Sennett, she also was in the short film. Can you talk about how you guys first met and then sort of how that character evolved from the short to the feature?
Totally. Yeah. So I met Rachel in school, and she was in a few other of my friends and other people's thesis projects. And she was hilarious. And if folks don't know, she's a comedian as well, and like has a hilarious Twitter and all the things. So I asked her to audition, and then she did, and really made the short film her own and put her own kind of stamp and style on it. It was originally supposed to be much more of a dramedy, and she kind of just used her improv skills and her style to make it a lot more fun and dynamic. So we felt like it was really important to keep her for the feature film, even though she didn't necessarily, people hadn't necessarily seen her in things. She wasn't like a star, and it might have been easier for us to get it financed if we did open that role up. But it felt really important to keep her because she made the character so much her own. And throughout the process of making the feature, developing it, I should say, she became, my best friend.
Mm,
And she's very goal oriented and very organized. And so she would constantly check in with me to see where we were at with the feature, because she became very invested in trying to see it, come to light. So I would share many drafts with her, almost more for accountability to say, like, I did it, I did the next draft, like, we're moving forward. But along the way, she got to see this character evolve by seeing all these drafts of trying it this way and trying it that way. So I think over time, she just got to know the character deeper
right.
and or more deeply, and offered line suggestions, or just was sort of a wonderful sounding board to the script, to the writing process. So In that way, I feel like she was sort of helping me create her as well, because I kind of got like a version of like a constant rehearsal process with her, even though we weren't reading the script, she was just offering ideas. So it did really, really evolve with her. Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds like an awesome collaboration, and a friendship
definitely.
born out of it too. So
Yes.
can't ask for more. Uh, but the rest of the cast, you said earlier, kind of making a quote unquote adult film or no longer a play film, but you have, an amazing cast with, Fred Melamed and Polly Draper. Like, kind of talk about the rest of the cast and sort of balancing that, because there are just obviously so many different personalities, big personalities that you're introducing throughout the film.
Totally. Yeah, I feel very lucky with the cast that we got, and I'm still kind of pinching myself that I got to direct them and that they were in this movie. A lot of these were sort of my dream ideas of the roles, like Fred Malman, definitely because of A Serious Man and also just him being incredible in general. Some of these were just my top picks, and I just sent them to them via our incredible casting director, Kate Geller, and they just said yes. And I think that Kate really wanted to focus on, because of our budget, New York local actors that we didn't have to put up. And specifically for a lot of the smaller roles, like who were from the New York theater community and were Jewish. For everybody, we tried to cast real Jewish actors or people who had close connections to the Jewish community. Like Polly is married to a Jewish person, and Diana, even though she's playing, a non-Jew, she herself is actually Jewish.
Right.
So we felt like if there was a deeper personal connection with the actors, even though if they were like bigger, and out of our sort of scope, that they would feel more likely to do it. So it was incredible working with all of them, and they're all very different. Like Fred Malamet is a theater actor, like through and through. Like he needs someone to say their line exactly beforehand, so he knows what his cue is and is always sticks exactly to each word of the script. Versus Molly Gordon, who's fantastic. She's much more of like a laid back, relaxed kind of like improvisational character actor. She did Good Boys and Booksmart, and I think she just has a background of like being able to kind of go on the fly, and she never says the same line twice. And so it was really just a wonderful hodgepodge. And then Polly Draper is just fantastic and is a wonderful improviser. And also because she's a director and writer, she had so many ideas. And I'm so glad, I was quite stubborn, but she felt like it was really important to give the mother sort of an arc that made her kind of figure out slightly that something was going on with Danielle, with her daughter.
Yeah.
And that's all because of her, because I'm not a mom and I'm not middle aged. So I don't know what it's like to have that wisdom and intuition about your kid. And I
Sure.
was like, oh, I know, I think they're oblivious. And she was like, no,
No, I
I
think they
don't
know.
think you can witness all of this and not have, questions going on in her head. So I just feel really lucky with everyone we got. And I also feel lucky that because Rachel was like not known, that we got to stack up the rest of the cast and they were willing to take supporting roles in a movie being led by someone relatively at the time unknown. So yeah, super lucky and excited we got this cast.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads me to my next point with Molly Gordon and Rachel. The chemistry is just so fantastic, and the film really does rely on that arc pulling through. How did you guys build that just such a biting, but you can really have the sense that they have so much history between them, but it's all unsaid until pretty much the very end.
Totally. Thank you for asking that, because that was like I think one of the trickiest parts of executing the movie was having that history sort of feel tangible and like you actually could feel it. And it was something that I struggled with in the writing process because I wanted it to feel real, and I really wanted to make sure I got this sort of like bisexual arc in place. And it was tricky to do, but I really, we didn't have a lot of time with Molly and Rachel. Like we couldn't afford rehearsal time at all. They basically met each other, I think a week or something before we started shooting, just to like say hi and get coffee. And like, I just knew from Molly's like sassiness and like sense of humor and book smart, and from meeting her that she would just have a really good chemistry with Rachel, who's so good at playing the like insecure, shy, sort of like more frazzled character. And I was right, but I think it took a little bit. We thankfully had one rehearsal day, barely, before we started shooting. When we shot their first scene, we were sort of like, what's the vibe here? Like, do they hate each other? Are they friends? And it was a hard scene to crack, and it took I think just a lot of tries of trying it this way and that way. But I remember Molly, who's so used to kind of like straight comedy, I mean, I shouldn't say that, she's done many other things as well, was like, am I angry or am I excited? And I was like, you're all these things. You're like, you're thinking about your past, but you're also this. And she was like, but which, what is it? And then, it just took a little bit to figure out, but I'm so grateful that they were patient
Mhm.
and took the time to really like feel out what that history could be. And I'm grateful for the end product. And I think it's a testament to the two of them just being like really good friends, after this, and just like, yeah, I think just having an innate good chemistry with each other.
Absolutely. And not just their relationship, but really the structure of the film itself and what's going on. Being at this Shiva, it's very frenetic. There's a lot going on. How did you kind of balance and manage and structure all that? It almost could be compared to, an Altman film with all these different conversations going on in different parts of the room and looking over and seeing what's that person's doing and whatnot, leading up to this almost unbearable tension of the pivotal scene.
Thank you. Well, thank you for saying that. That's a big compliment. I think it mostly came in the writing. Like I really wanted to be able to I almost worried that it wouldn't be interesting or anxious enough. And so I just looked to anxiety movies like that I thought did claustrophobia really well. And the first thing that kind of inspired that was Krisha, Trey Edward Schultz's first film.
Yeah.
I just watched it. I'd seen it before, but I rewatched it because of the one day, one location situation, which I just think is, people have done it before for sure, but it's, so I watched a few of other ones, or a few days in one location. And I just thought it was so smart of him that he used so much anxiety and tension to keep you there in that space, and sound design, and so many things. And so I looked after that. I just started thinking about other movies that are sort of like just ridden with anxiety. So I watched like Black Swan and a few Cassavetes movies, and Rachel Getting Married, and a lot of like films with high tension. So I think that it came first in the writing, and then I think I just jam packed it as much as possible, and tried to make it as anxious as possible. So you would just sit there and
Great.
watch. But I think it was every stage of the process really helped what you're talking about, of sort of matching, this is going on over here and that's going on over here. I mean, we used a Lego set to kind of figure out where everyone is in the house, and
Oh,
yeah, just
map it
I
out.
really, yeah, to map it out. And I really credit my DP Maria Rushi to really like helping me figure out like ways to differentiate the claustrophobia and differentiate the anxiety between each room. And also our AD, who helped, even though it's so technical scheduling, he understood what needed to go into every room, and what that would mean for all the looks across the rooms and things like that. So it was, sometimes they were looking at nothing, like Molly was like looking across the room at just a blank wall, and then it all came down in
Sure.
the edit
Right.
to
Great.
faking a lot of stuff. But yeah, it was a team effort to kind of figure out how to schedule everything, because we only had certain actors like for a couple days. And then also, just the way that we shot it, and definitely in the edit for sure.
Absolutely. And I do kind of want to go back to what you're saying with like building the anxiety in the writing process, that combined with, writing comedy. There are so many great lines in there. I've just wrote down one, you look like Gwyneth Paltrow on food stamps. Like, how much of the comedy did that come out, with your collaboration with Rachel, or through dialogue, or like jokes, you tell with your friends, or it was you sitting writing this comedic fare at the same time of writing, trying to make people as anxious as possible, and, dreading being or social and around their family and friends.
Totally. I think that what I felt the most confident in for me was the Jewish humor. I don't think I'm necessarily good at comedy in general, but I think that the reason I chose to make my first feature, about a Jewish family function, was just because I felt like that could roll off my tongue really easily, just from years of kind of absorbing material and being like, I'm just writing this all down for a movie one day, even though it feels crazy right now. So I felt like, so I wrote most of the comedy, most of the like humor was written, just it written into the script, but I think I gave Molly and everybody room to ad lib. I mean, Fred did not ad lib one thing. He stuck to it. So all of his jokes were written by me. But a lot of people's favorite lines I've seen were improvised. Like that one, the Gwyneth Paltrow one was not. That Polly improvised so much. So a lot of, or
Yeah.
ad libbed, I should say. So we didn't have the ability to really like be like, let's scrap this scene. Let's just like see what you guys can come up with. But I think, especially with Molly and Rachel, they had fun sort of, adding details and to their lines and trying it in different ways. So it was a collaboration, but especially because it was just such a tight shoot and really, really contained. And we were on a schedule and a budget. There wasn't too much room for improv. So a lot of Rachel's ideas for lines came earlier. Like it was her idea to have Jackie Hoffman be like, maybe you should run marches, or, it's her
Right.
line for sure when she's like, I don't really want to be like a girl boss. So she added those touches for
Right.
sure in the writing process. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. One aspect of the film that we haven't really discussed yet, but is a integral part of it, is the sexuality and the power dynamics there within. And you're starting the film with two people having sex, and then you kind of go on this journey of empowerment, and then the quote unquote sugar daddy thing. What interests you about that, as a younger woman with being with an older man within this setting? Like, what kind of messages are you looking to tell?
Totally. I think initially when I made this short film, I just was curious about writing about sugar babies, just because it was such a huge part of my world going to college in New York. And I initially was just like, oh, let's throw a sugar baby at a Shiva. Like that should be funny. But the more that I unpacked the story, the more I became interested in the themes that you're talking about and the dynamics you're talking about. I think ultimately what it came down to when I was making the short was a story about a young woman realizing that her sexual power, it was not as powerful or as far reaching as she thought it was, or that it can't sustain her self-worth for as long as she thinks it could. And I think Rachel was very interested in, tracking with me, at what point does she have power? At what point does she not? And I think it's just about sort of that feeling as a young woman or a young man, like just sexual power dynamics in general, when you feel like you have power and then you sort of like ride with that, but you go too far and then you lose the power.
Mhm.
And I think the main message I was just trying to get across was that sort of sexual validation thing, and being like, oh wow, like my whole self-worth has been riding on this, and it's not lasting anymore. And I that was the kernel of a sort of theme or idea I really just wanted to get across in the feature and run with as much as possible. So that was mostly what I was interested in exploring. But also, in terms of sexuality at large, I don't think you meant it this way, but like wanting to explore like a bisexual character, and someone who has complicated dynamics with multiple people, and just sort of the idea of like male validation in general for young women when you're like a bisexual person and what that means when you crave that sort of attention, more importantly than the attention of women. So yeah, I just sort of wanted to like, I don't, other than that sort of core theme I mentioned, I kind of just wanted to display someone that was super messy and making decisions very instinctually and not without thinking about them fully. You know, so people can interpret whatever they want. I think Rachel had very specific ideas about the power dynamics, and I sort of just let her um, run with that inspiration for the character and for what was going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Emma, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. It was an excellent conversation and a really excellent film. I can't tell you
Thank
how much I
you.
loved it. I laughed out loud multiple times, which I never do watching a screener at home by myself. So kudos to you. I hope
Thank
everyone enjoys
you.
it. I know they will. Thanks so
Thank you
much.
so much for having me and for screening your film and taking the time to talk about it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Have a good
Thank
one.
you. Have a good day.